I want to associate myself with the remarks of the chairman and the ranking member both on the Iranian deal. Regardless of my vote or anybody else's vote, we have to be steadfast in sticking to it. They live up to their side of the bargain. If we don't, we're a paper tiger and there'll never be any good diplomacy, period. I want to follow up on what Senator Kaine said in his timeline about 2014 and ISIL. And I want to take it back one additional year to 2013, because it was October of 2013 when the administration declared it was going to make a limited strike against Assad because he crossed the red line that had been drawn in the sand in Syria. The Congress, not this committee I might add, but the Congress kind of backed up on that, didn't give him the support, and the administration, although they could have under the War Powers Act, gone ahead and made a limited strike, decided not to. So we became a paper tiger at that particular point in time. That was in 2013. In 2014, ISIL knew we were getting ready to leave Iraq open in terms of any American troops being left there. We created a vacuum in Iraq, which ISIL immediately filled by claiming for a territory. We're taking some of it back now with our coalition partners. But the fact is we took a terrible setback because we withdrew entirely from Iraq. So my beginning of my statement is, I think we made a mistake, we Republicans and Democrats, administration and Congress, by backing away from doing a definitive military lesson in Syria in 2013 when we had the opportunity and there was a clear line that had been drawn in the sand. I understand the need to do diplomacy, and I prefer diplomacy any time over war. I lose every war I ever have with my wife. With diplomacy, I sometimes can win. So I think it's important to have a good diplomatic solution. But diplomacy only works when there's a threat of force otherwise. Now, yesterday in the Armed Services Committee, General Dunford and Secretary Carter said that the door was open for more, and I quote, direct action against ISIL. Now, that's a eyes of the beholder type statement, but at least it sends the signal that they may be looking at other options in terms of ISIL. And I think ISIL is the focal point upon which a military action or an expansion of military action is not only appropriate but instructive in helping us with diplomacy everywhere else, personally. The spoils of war ISIL has won in terms of the refugee issue. I just got back from Greece and Italy where we've seen 500,000 refugees, 70% of them Syrian middle-class people flowing through Greece trying to get into Europe. The Hungarians closing their border. We see a crisis of immense proportion going all the way to the country of Sweden that's going to get worse next year than it is this year simply because of things that are taking place now. So my question, I'm making a speech and I apologize for that, but my question is, if we don't consider forcefully and practically the use of force against ISIL to wipe them out militarily or to send such a clear signal to them they're going to be wiped out that they back away, that cancer is going to continue to grow because you can't negotiate with somebody that will cut off your head, burn somebody in the town square, destroy the antiquities of history of a country, or kill humanitarians. You just can't do it. And I think we've got a great Air Force. I think the airstrikes are fine, but you don't win them with airstrikes. And we cannot let that cancer continue to grow because if we do, no diplomatic solution in any Middle Eastern problem is going to help. So I'd just like for you to comment for just a second, not necessarily on my premise on this, but on what was said yesterday by General Dunford and Secretary Carter, and if you believe a possibility to have a more robust military action against ISIL would be a positive result. General Carter, General Allen.
Well, Senator, I absolutely agree with what you said. I've been around a little while, and I've never seen anything like this organization before in the depths of its deprivation and its depravity. And this is an organization that we obviously have to deal with. I think the testimony yesterday from General Dunford and Secretary Carter pointed to recommendations and thoughts that they are going to provide to the President of the United States on the potential means to deal with or to enhance the means by which we want to accomplish the ends. And direct action, as I was describing earlier, the idea of pressuring Daesh simultaneously around its periphery, which is we're setting ourselves up to begin to do that. One of the values of direct action is going after the nervous system inside. This is where no one on the planet does it better than we do. The targeted direct action strike force supported raid. And I won't go into the operational details associated with it, but I think that that's frankly a positive development in the thinking conceivably for how to deal with Daesh. And I'll just make one key point. When Our special operators entered the Abu Sayyaf compound last year, killed him and the other two that were in the meeting with him, and wiped out his personal security detachment. And then arrested his wife, Sayyaf, who was responsible for the slave trade of ISIL, and liberated a Yazidi sex slave and took 7 terabytes of information off the compound. It wasn't because we just did that raid spontaneously. You can imagine that as we did in Afghanistan every night, 10 to 15 times across the country, it was a well-developed mission, which had a very high likelihood of success when properly supported. And it not only accomplished a military objective, it accomplished an extraordinarily important intelligence objective as well. And other ISIL leaders have met their end directly as a result of the sensitive site exploitation coming out of the Abu Sayyaf raid. And I believe that's what the Secretary and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs were describing yesterday. And if they're thinking in those terms and making that recommendation to the President of the United States, and I would certainly support it.
Well, I appreciate your answer because I'm up in 2016 for re-election, and there's lots going to happen between now and next November, but this is one person that's going to be a voice and a vote for a more aggressive stance against ISIL, to see to it we go after the enemy of all mankind, not just the United States of America. And I know once terrorism came, that genie got out of the bottle, you're never going to put it back in, but by golly, we shouldn't tolerate it, and we should give every effort the United States can do to destroy it in its most robust fashion possible. And I think it helps with the diplomacy in Syria if you separate that action away from the Syrian people and Assad and target it strictly on the enemy, which is ISIL, which is Syria's enemy as well as our enemy.
That's exactly correct, sir. I absolutely support your comments.
And I know my time's almost up, but I want to thank Ms. Patterson for a statement you made, which was, I think, very telling and very honest and very candid, which you always are. You the chairman asked you the goals of the administration in the Middle East, and you said counterterrorism, human rights, economic growth, and then you said all of which we're pursuing, but we're being limited because of ISIL. And we're kind of in a series of crisis management in the Middle East. And I thought that was a very honest answer, because you take any front page of any newspaper in America and go from day to day, it's another crisis in the Middle East, different from the crisis we had the day before. So counterterrorism and things like that are impossible to have strategies on when you're reacting on a daily basis to the forces that are at work. So I hope as a country we will use our military strength as an example of why diplomacy is a far better way to reach solutions in the Middle East than military solutions. But if we have to, we're prepared to do whatever it takes to see to it that the United States enforces and respects human rights and the right of law and the right rule of law in every nation in the country, in the world. Thank you very much, Ms. Patterson.